Welcome back to the Paladin Archives. My name is Mason Cren, and this is Monster Menagerie. Anyway, this is the show where I guide you through our year-long trek of fictional beasties. Of course, this, our inaugural year, we're starting with the granddaddy of all classical monsters, the vampire. We've already taken a look at both Count Dracula and Edward Cullen, so if you haven't seen those videos, there should be a link on screen to send you that way. I had a blast researching those guys, but now it's time to dig into a more contemporary vampire, one that held the internet hostage for the majority of 2021. Yes, I'm talking about the 9-foot, 6-inch vampire mommy that made many a player question their personal kinks, Lady Dimitrescu. Now, to be clear, I'm aware that Capcom apparently didn't put a lot of effort into figuring out how that name would be pronounced properly, but since we go by what we can observe here on Monster Menagerie, I'm using the pronunciation she uses. If you're new to the series, my job with the Paladin Order is to observe, monitor, and assess threat levels of any creatures we may come across, so that I can make useful recommendations to any of the paladins in the field that may encounter trouble. We're going to be looking into all the scenes in Resident Evil Village that may have pertinent information to Lady Dimitrescu and analyzing her abilities and threat level. We're not looking at any DLC, any extended lore, or outside sources that can clarify her abilities and powers. What we see in-game is what I have to work with. Before we get too far in, I want to remind you all that if you like what we do here at the Paladin Archives, you should head over to MatiasTautimas.com, where writer Matias Tautimas has been working hard on his debut novel that depicts our organization. You can learn more about the Order, see some great artwork, and even read sample chapters from the upcoming debut, The Paladin. Link down in the description. Oh, also, don't forget that in December, we're going to take all the vampires we've looked at through the year and stack them up against each other to see which one is the best of the best when it comes to vampires. Keep your eyes peeled because we'll have polls for you to make sure your voice is heard. Dracula? Edward Cullen? Lady Dimitrescu? Who else is going to join the list? Well, make sure you like and subscribe to find out. Okay, I think I've stalled enough. It's time to grab our winter coats and make that long trek up to Castle Dimitrescu. I hope you've got your green herbs and chem fluids ready because it's time to craft us a Monster Menagerie analysis. Okay, so this is going to be a little awkward. With our last two entrants, Dracula and Edward, the source material was simply a movie. Watch it several times, and that's all I can draw from. Lady Dimitrescu is from a game, which is a much more interactive medium. The way I analyze things, it took me almost 6 hours to do my first watch of Twilight, a 2-hour movie. Being that I am both horrible at these kind of games and don't have easy access to it, I'm relying on Let's Plays, which admittedly limits my ability to explore the medium. Still, as this is an observation-based analysis, I think we can still learn quite a bit that's relevant. My mistakes, and there will be a few, should at least give you an idea of how the Paladin Order ascertains threats. Sometimes we get it wrong. Lady Alcina Dimitrescu was born sometime in the early 1900s, like Edward. A noblewoman and descendant of one of the founding lineages of the game's titular village, she was afflicted with a hereditary blood disease of some sort. We can assume this likely came from the aristocracy's habit of choosing mates from a very limited pool of candidates. What I'm saying is, I have a feeling the Dimitrescu ladies didn't need to change their last names after getting married. Apparently they were good at making wine though, so maybe that was worth all the cousin dating. At some point, she returned to the village to meet up with Mother Miranda and was experimented on. I suspect this was under the guise of curing her hemophilia, but I'm not certain. What I do know is she had a strange insect called a kudoo implanted into her, and it turned her into, a big vampire mommy. Wow, that is a big lady. What was I saying? Right, bugs! A center point of the game seems to be this insect called a kudoo created by the game's villain, Mother Miranda. From the logs in-game, we learn that Miranda was looking for a host for her daughter, and our beloved Lady Dimitrescu was one of several possible candidates. One bug insertion later, and she's altering her body and chomping down on people. I assumed at first her size might have been the results of her parents hooking up at a family reunion, as is the style of the aristocracy. But there's a medical report in-game that actually addresses that. Apparently her rapid regeneration is the source of Dimitrescu's staggering height. So tall. Here's a first for Monster Menagerie. At one point after becoming a vampire, she experimented with some girls from the nearby village, and after letting Kadoo flies eat them, boom, she got herself 3 daughters. I bring this up because, much like the player character Ethan Winters, any paladins that deal with Lady Dimitrescu will have to deal with Bella, Daniela, and Cassandra too. So, for the following segments, I'll make sure to do a quick mini-analysis of the daughters. Okay, I think that's all the pertinent information. And I only got distracted, once. Yeah. Let's do personality. Okay, maybe this segment was a mistake. Lady Dimitrescu was a noble, or at least from a noble lineage. It seems when she arrived at the village, she took to her new role as, Countess, I think it is? She took to her role quite, enthusiastically. One might say she's rather, commanding, dominating, even. Whatever adjectives you choose to use, she certainly embraces her role at the top of the hierarchy. She definitely sees herself as a higher class than, literally anyone else in the game, besides Mother Miranda. She has no compunctions against torture and murder, has basements literally flooded with blood, or wine? I wasn't really certain when I watched through, but either way, says quite a bit about her. She has torture rooms, her family killed maids for the smallest infractions, and apparently hung men up as hollowed-out scarecrows. Like Dracula, I want to say her defining feature is class, but then I'd be lying. Even Dracula was able to keep himself composed when things didn't go his way. Lady Dimitrescu is cruel and barbarous right from the start. Dracula snacked on people to sustain himself. Edward and his family dined on animals to avoid that. Dimitrescu revels in her human Lunchables. Of course, that attitude is clearly apparent in her daughters as well. They are cruel and merciless and absolutely dedicated to their mother. They revel in the taste of blood, delight in causing Ethan Winters pain, and seem to be, in scientific terms, out of their freaking minds. All this makes for quite the start on her paladin threat level, and we haven't even gotten to her abilities. One nice thing about this game, it does specifically spell out her basic abilities. Of course, I'm still observing her actions in-game, but the player can find a medical report that flat out says what she can do. Subject name, Alcina Dimitrescu. Kadoo affinity, most favorable. Brain functions, normal. Regeneration is incredibly fast. The subject can heal any external wound within seconds and grow her nails into claws in mere moments. Rapid regeneration also means an increased body size. Note: due to hereditary blood disease, the subject must ingest human flesh and blood on a regular basis to maintain regeneration properties. I suspect that if the subject's regeneration is not properly balanced, she may mutate uncontrollably, an unfit vessel forever. Rapid regeneration, the ability to morph her nails into claws, her large stature. All of these are spelled out by the game in logs and in gameplay, with the bonus that we get to see her turn into a dragon thing later in the game. That certainly makes my job easier. We don't see anything else really show up. If she can morph into other forms, she doesn't in-game. There is a mention that she is, quote, arbitrarily able to control body transformation, but it wasn't clear, at least to me, what that actually meant. If she has super strength, well, that's not really on display either. If we account for her size increasing her muscle mass, about the most intense feat of strength we see her display is either slamming Ethan Winters through the castle floor or yeeting a vanity in anger. Side note, would you guys be interested in a bonus video about Ethan Winters? I know nothing about this man outside the scenes where he interacts with Lady Dimitrescu. Again, I didn't play the game, I just watched it. Trust me, I would have learned nothing by playing this game. Too much to scare the crap out of me and distract me. Either way, Ethan is such a beast. He gets his hands impaled, rips the hooks clean through them between the fingers, and even gets his freaking hand cut off. That just feels like an episode in and of itself. Anyway, Ethan gets chokeslammed through the castle floor, which we don't really know the condition of. Castle Dimitrescu seems to be quite old, and you can see real signs of neglect and decay throughout it. We can see in this scene that as Lady Dimitrescu continues to slam Ethan's head against the floor, it splinters, revealing it to be wooden. Normally I'd do some fancy math here to figure out how many newtons of force it would take to break through that wood, but come on, it's just wood and it's an old castle. She's strong, no doubt, but nothing outside the realm of human abilities. Large human abilities, but human nonetheless. As for that vanity, yes, it looks heavy, but she uses both hands and just kind of heaves it. A gentle toss. It goes maybe about 10 feet or so. Now, that is definitely a heavier vanity than I could lift, but it still isn't outside the realm of human abilities. At no point I saw did she hurl something across the room or smash down a castle wall while in her vampire form. I'd say that for Dimitrescu's size, her strength is about what we should expect. Monstrous for a human. Let's take a quick sidestep to analyze the three vampire daughters of Dimitrescu. Right off the bat, we can see where they set themselves apart from their mother. Bugs. Lots of bugs. From the files in-game, we learn that the three girls, Bella, Daniela, and Cassandra, were experimented on by Lady Dimitrescu. Flies literally consumed their bodies, then slowly became them? They seem to have lost whatever previous identity they had and gladly accepted Dimitrescu as their mother. But those flies didn't go away. They appear to be literally made of the weird insects. At a whim, the girls can dissipate into clouds of the insects. Now, from what I observed in-game, it doesn't look like the individual insects share information with them. They can't spy with them. Ethan runs from them at various points in the game, and even though the bugs are literally popping out of his hands... I'm sorry, I just need a moment. This game... Anyway, the daughters appear none the wiser about his actual location when chasing him. Just to be clear, we do see similar clouds of bugs come from Lady Dimitrescu in her monster dragon form, but only then. If she has the same ability normally, she doesn't demonstrate it. Let's look at their regeneration next. For both Dimitrescu and her daughters, the game doesn't show them actually healing so much as just shrugging off attacks. Initial encounters show that any damage you try to inflict on them is more or less ignored. According to the in-game files, this is their, quote, incredibly fast regeneration rate. This would seem to make them functionally invulnerable, but this is a video game and it'd be pretty boring if they didn't have some kind of weakness. For the girls, it's the cold. Apparently the insects that comprise them are susceptible to low temperatures, so when it's cold, they're vulnerable to common attacks. Guns, explosives, knives, etc. For the lady herself, it's a bit more complicated. From what we can observe, the cold doesn't seem to have any noticeable effect on her like it does for her daughters. The key to her invulnerability appears to be a blade coated in just, like, all the poisons. There's a file that mentions the Dagger of Death's Flowers, a blade coated in, quote, poisons from across the continent. When Ethan stabs Lady Dimitrescu with it, she freaks out and loses control of her shape and turns into that weird dragon knuckle-y thing. In that form, she's vulnerable to Ethan's attacks. Conventional weaponry seems more than adequate to enter, even if it does take a while. But since we're here, let's look at this white dragon form of hers. She can fly, that's apparent. She gets quite the bump in strength, as we can see her bashed through the castle wall. Now, I can't calculate her force exactly, but I think I can get within the ballpark. She breaks through castle walls and ramparts a few times in the boss fight with Ethan. Most of the castle is made of brick and mortar, but when she first transforms, you can clearly see chunks of the wall are solid stone. Some of these pieces are easily a meter thick. If we're generous and say these are sandstone slabs that make up the wall, then all we need to do is look up the ultimate tensile strength of sandstone, which is about 25 megapascals. To make it easy, let's say the Dragon Maw contacts the solid stone wall with an area of about 1 meter squared. Let's magic a little math off screen for you guys, and you end up with a force of about, holy crap, 2,552 metric tons. Oh, that is a huge difference in strength from her human form. If I did my math right, Dragon Dimitrescu is easily our strongest vampire to date. If you recall, I said in the first episode of Monster Menagerie that Count Dracula could lift an African bush elephant. Lady Dimitrescu is exerting a force equivalent to 400 elephants. Man, and I thought her stepping on you was going to be the most dangerous thing she did. Oh boy. Okay, well, I guess I'm obligated to explore Lady Dimitrescu's physique. Well, first off, she's obviously, quite large. She's incredibly pale, and I think she may suffer from hemophilia. Hemophilia, for those that don't know, is a rare genetic condition that keeps the blood from clotting. It can shorten lifespans, especially back in Lady Dimitrescu's time before she became a vampire. Apparently, her mutation process didn't actually cure her, so that is something to consider in her assessment. Let's see, no visible fangs on her or her daughters, though the latter do have just like all the bugs around them. They are covered in flies most of the game. I guess what I'm getting at is these ladies aren't fooling anyone. Even Dracula looked more normal than them. Again, we know from the in-game journals that the cold weather weakens the girls, and despite her healing factor, Lady D herself is susceptible to poison. She also appears to be in dire need of food once she was stabbed. We hear her say, "Flesh, bones, I will devour you all," during the fight, as well as, "Not enough blood, more blood," and "I need your flesh." This all suggests to me that her healing ability is failing her, and rather quickly. Without his flesh and blood, she can't regenerate. Oh, I almost forgot to bring this up, but well, I think Lady Dimitrescu may have some visual and auditory impairments. There's no logs on this, but if we pay attention, every time Ethan Winters enters a room with Lady Dimitrescu, she doesn't notice him. He typically grunts, sighs, or otherwise makes noise on these wooden floors that would normally alert someone to the presence of a second person, but she takes no notice. He breaks pottery, slams doors, and otherwise makes a lot of noise while the Countess and her daughters are actively looking for him. Even when the lady does finally notice him, she has trouble staying on task, often losing him when he dips through doors. Perhaps her mutation has affected her sense of object permanence? But to further this, she's also incredibly slow. Perhaps it's because of her heels, but Ethan Winters is able to play keep away with her just by circling furniture. She never runs, never seems to be in a hurry. And well, on top of it all, he seems to be able to block and parry her slashing attacks with just the barrel of his pistol in his bare hands. Okay, let's pull all that knowledge together. As you may recall, when I report to paladins in the field, I often give them a paladin threat level. A quick reference to help them understand at a glance how dangerous the situation is. The scale goes from 1 to 10, with 1 being minor nuisances and 10 being legitimate world-ending apocalypses. So, like, if Aunt Dolores found a grimoire at a garage sale and accidentally turned her cat into a cobra, that's a 1. A single paladin can take care of that in an afternoon. 10 is more like, explorers unsealed a cursed vault that opened up into the bowels of the 7th hell and archdemons appeared to usher in Armageddon. Doubtful I'm gonna list any 10s this year. I'm going to start with the daughters. It looks like they're able to form sickles as their main weapons and transform into clouds of bugs. Normal attacks against them would prove fruitless, but their actual attack capacity doesn't seem to be outrageous. Deadly, of course, but not beyond what a good anti-freak or anti-heretic paladin could handle. Seeing as how the entire castle is surrounded by freezing temperatures, I don't think it's too hard for a good paladin to figure out how to introduce the cold into their attack strategy. Oh, I just realized, I immediately assumed we're not taking these ladies alive. I'd normally want to consider that as an option, but, well, I think most of you would probably agree with me. That's not an option here, right? Anyway, for the girls, I'd give them individually a paladin threat level of 3. I know that sounds low, but the scale is weighted toward the bottom. A 3 is pretty dangerous by normal terms. So long as these are one-on-one fights, though, a single paladin shouldn't have too much of an issue neutralizing their targets. Even if all 3 appeared together, your typical paladin parish has at least 4 knights in it, so they should be good. Okay, now on to Lady Dimitrescu. I'm gonna have to rate her human and dragon forms separately, as they are vastly different in threat level. Assuming she hasn't been stabbed, an encounter with Lady Dimitrescu might actually go your way so long as you can walk faster than 3 miles per hour. Unlike her daughters, she doesn't lunge at Ethan. She follows him slowly, despite screaming about her hatred of him. I might think this was her playing with her food or something, but even when her daughters are all dead and she's supposedly trying to get revenge, Ethan can easily juke her like a toddler ditching their parent at Walmart. I think I might actually rate Vampire Dimitrescu a 2. If she catches you, you're in trouble, but that is a seriously big if. Now, Dragon Dimitrescu, there's a real threat. While she still seems much less focused on outright killing her prey instead of playing with it, she has considerably more capacity to kill like this. She's faster, she flies, she has insane strength, and she can send out those hordes of insects. She is, at least, vulnerable in this form, but also much more dangerous. Ethan, despite what a beast he is still just one person with what I take to be little formal training. While I wouldn't suggest a single paladin take on Lady Dimitrescu, I can see them being capable of taking her down. I think her blood disease may provide an avenue of attack. A powerful hemotoxin may open her up to attack like the Dagger of Death's Flowers did. For her dragon form, I give Lady Dimitrescu a paladin threat level of 3. Okay, so let's spitball what we can actually do to harm these ladies. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say negotiation or containment aren't the goal. So long as they remain in their element, both the girls and the lady are virtually invulnerable. For the girls, we need to get them cold. So, much like Ethan, we need to look at blowing holes in that castle, explosive charges, maybe even just some grenades. I've heard the patronage has some cryo gear. I haven't seen it myself, but I think it's basically a rifle connected to a tank that expels liquid nitrogen. That would be pretty good for both the swarms of insects and the girls themselves, assuming we can requisition one. Best to have a backup plan just in case. Lady Dimitrescu is a tough nut to crack, though. She's basically invulnerable in her human state, but considerably more lethal in her dragon state. She shouldn't be too hard to avoid in the former state. From what I can see, she doesn't seem to be all that observant. She moves slow and seems very easy to avoid. This could come in handy for setting up a trap or otherwise getting things ready for her. Now we see that the Dagger of Death's Flowers was able to impart its deadly coating to Lady Dimitrescu without too much hassle. That tells me darts could be an effective option. Poison, tranquilizers, maybe even the hemotoxin I mentioned earlier could be utilized to bring her down. In fact, while I doubt circumstances would allow, I can envision a very narrow series of events that would lead to her being tranquilized, removed from the castle, and carefully drained of her blood until her healing was no longer a threat. The in-game note on her condition says, due to hereditary blood disease, the subject must ingest human flesh and blood on a regular basis to maintain regeneration properties. I suspect that if the subject's regeneration is not properly balanced, she may mutate uncontrollably. When we talked about Edward Cullen, I mentioned that draining him of blood is a viable tactic we can implement against vampires to weaken them, but that log entry has me questioning the viability when it comes to Lady Dimitrescu. Would she simply weaken enough to be neutralized, or would she automatically change into her dragon form and make things 1,000 times worse? It may not be worth the danger to attempt that route. It seems like any way you cut it, you're gonna have to fight her in her dragon form. Might as well do it right away. let's just be straight here. There's no negotiation with these ladies. They delight in death and torture. My recommendations here will all be for neutralization. Full parish dispatch, so minimum of 4 paladins. As always, I recommend backup, but paladins never seem to listen. Focus on anti-freak, anti-heretic containment strategies. Lady Dimitrescu appears to enjoy delegating, so I think it's likely our paladins in the field will face the daughters first. Recommendations? Cold weather gear, obviously. Thick coverings and facial protection to keep the bugs out. Explosives to introduce cold weather. If we can requisition it, cryo gear. Freeze, then attack liberally with conventional firearms. For Lady Dimitrescu, poison darts. Hemotoxins if possible. Focus on either poisoning her or getting her to bleed. As much as I'd like to have the responding paladins take her out in her vampire form, I have the sneaking suspicion she'll only be vulnerable in her dragon form, so expedite the situation. She's easy to lead on, so distraction tactics to set her up for the most favorable conditions for the responding paladins. Trigger her transformation, then liberal use of conventional weapons targeting the torso sticking out of the dragon's back. With a little planning and proper cooperation, a single parish should be more than capable of neutralizing both the girls and Lady Dimitrescu. Well, that's Lady Dimitrescu. I managed to get throughout it without mentioning her stepping on me more than once. It was a little prickly trying to do the research on this one, but I think I managed to get everything we needed. What do you think? I'm sure there's some, let's call them fans of Lady Dimitrescu who might be disappointed with my assessment, but I promise I tried to be as fair as I could. So, who's your favorite vampire so far? Lady Dimitrescu? Edward Cullen? Perhaps the original vamp, Count Dracula? We're starting to gather a nice little collection here, and once we have them all, we're going to be ranking them on which one best exemplifies the virtues of vampirism. Make sure you stick around to vote in that poll because it's going to be a lot of fun. I stream over on Twitch too. Sometimes games I'm reviewing for my side hustle, sometimes research like I did for Lady Dimitrescu. And of course, if you're enjoying the world of the Paladin Archives, make sure you swing by MatthiasTautimus.com to check out the debut novel, The Paladin, that recounts some of the adventures of our little clandestine group. If you have a suggestion for which vampire we should cover next, drop it down in the comment section or hit us up on Twitter, @PaladinArchive. For now, I gotta get back to work. We got a new shipment of grimoires in, and Maddie hates checking those in by herself. Until next time, keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's hiding out there. Official Capcom sources say that Lady Dimitrescu's feet are 44 centimeters long or 17.3 inches. There. Now you're burdened with this knowledge too.